Hello again. Just like last time, the thumbnail for today's video features artwork by Luke Headland. You can click the link in the description to view much more of Luke's Saw-related work. Once again, thank you, Luke, for allowing me to use your work for these videos. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm going to assume that you've seen at least my last entry, which was all about the first Saw film. And assuming you've seen that one, then you should know what to expect with this one. There will be 5 sections of this video, the first 3 of which you can watch if you've only seen the first 2 films in this series. The last bit of this video, which will be the last 2 sections, you should only watch if you've seen the first 6 entries in the Saw series. And like last time, each of those sections will be time-coded in the description, so feel free to skip ahead or jump around as much as you'd like. So without further ado, let's get into Saw 2.
I am going to give you a hint as to where I've hidden the key, so listen carefully. The hint is this. It's right before your eyes.
So Saw 2 is really the first installment where we really get the wordplay aspect of Jigsaw.
The price you pay is that you must crawl into the same pit of squalor you force your customers into. It will be like finding a needle in a haystack.
There was a little bit of it in the first film, like when he's talking about Mark burning people with his act, and then Paul's trap with the razor wire wasn't as much wordplay as it just was poetic justice, as Jigsaw would see it. But Saw 2 is where the wordplay gets a lot more prevalent, and generally speaking, I think it's usually pretty clever.
Excuse me. Help you? Here for Daniel Matthews. Thanks.
I always enjoy this introduction to Eric Matthews because he's smoking right next to a sign that says no smoking. It serves to show us that this is not a guy that follows the rules exactly, and it's also just kind of funny. So this is another thing that I remember joking around with my brother about, and that was the idea that none of the other police officers or forensic techs were going to notice the Wilson Steel logo on the device. But I think what actually is happening here is a bit more subtle than that. I think Eric has some kind of past at that location, probably somewhere that he apprehended one of the people that he framed. And that's why he specifically is supposed to make the connection between the device and that location that he's been to in the past. Whereas all the other investigators would have just seen that and probably thought that that's just where the metal came from. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they would have eventually checked out the factory, but what I'm trying to say is that Eric Matthews, the fact that the message is left for him, telling him to look closer, I think he's the one that's supposed to make that connection the quickest and understand where he's being led. Also, I don't know if this is a production error or if there's some sort of intention behind it, but Eric's last name has 2 T's, and so it's misspelled in the message to him. This is one of those cool little moments when you're rewatching for the first time where you realize that when they open that door, that's what powers up the machines and starts the tapes playing and the timer ticking down.
Hey. Hey, wake up. Hey. Can you hear me? She's still breathing.
Okay, so I absolutely love this sequence of the 8 people waking up in that room. I think it does an absolutely fantastic job quickly establishing who everybody is and what their personalities are like and what their dynamics are going to be. It's also absolutely full of little missable details that, again, on rewatch, are just really neat to kind of look at and be like, oh, wow, there was a hint. For example, the way several people actually look at Abby as if they recognize him, and he has his hood up and he's trying to kind of keep anybody from having a good look at him.
Just get them here now. Alright, victims on board. You should have your signal trace within an hour, maybe 2. So
there are actually a couple of shots where you can see both the safe that Daniel is in and the fact that Jigsaw's desk is set up in an elevator.
Remember, Abby, once you are in hell, only the devil can help you out.
So I know it took me a couple of viewings back when I was a teenager to catch this little detail, but Abby's tape says that once you are in hell, only the devil can let you out. And then we actually see a couple of shots of a knob inside the oven with an illustration of the devil pointing and saying twist. The implication being that all Abby had to do was turn the knob and then he'd be fine. He'd probably suffer some minor burns, but he could have gotten out of that situation relatively quickly. I find it kind of amusing the way that Daniel's kind of obviously crushing on Laura during this movie. So another blink and you miss it clue is you can actually see Xavier's tattoo on the back of his neck in this scene.
If what that tape says is true, then in 1 hour the front door will open.
We're not gonna make it that long!
So at this stage in the story, everyone in the house has been exhibiting severe symptoms from the gas, with the notable exception of Amanda. If the audience or the people in the house with Amanda were paying enough attention, they might find that suspicious. The obvious conclusion here is that she preemptively took an antidote before pretending to be one of the victims. So for people that are newer to this series, it's probably not obvious how this trap was supposed to work. If you look carefully at the top of the frame, you'll see that this box is padlocked from the inside and it has the key inside the lock. So the idea is that someone could put one arm through one of the holes, turn that key and unlock the box from the inside, then use their other hand to raise the razors and get their arm out, and then open the now unlocked box from the outside, at which point you can use both hands to take the needle off of the tape.
We're in.
Daniel!
Carrie, we're in the house.
So in this climactic sequence where we're jumping from person to person, the clips of Eric making his way into the house and to the trap door and then down into the tunnels are very obviously showing us that he has arrived much later than the events of the house game.
Daniel!
And we're seeing these things before the official reveal happens. And yet I think most people are so caught up in everything that's going on that they usually don't catch on to that. I know I didn't. I'd be curious to hear if there's anybody out there that actually did catch on to that before the big reveal happened. But But yeah, one of those clips that indicates he's there much later than we originally thought is this shot of Jonas's rotted hand next to an antidote. And you can see in this same scene that the safe has now been opened, and therefore that is where this antidote must have come from. I think Amanda opened the safe because the key to get out of the house was also in there with that antidote. I know some people have speculated that she opened the safe to use the antidote inside for Daniel. But the problem with that is that you can see the needle hasn't been used, the one that's on the floor by the safe. I actually believe that Daniel's antidote was stashed in the bathroom, and that's why Amanda steers him down there. When she first sees that Jonas has been killed, she rushes to find Daniel and then brings him back to that room, at which point, yeah, she sees the blood, revealing the trapdoor, and then, yeah, they go down there.
He's gone.
Doesn't matter. All I want is the number in the back of his neck.
Okay, so let's talk about the numbers on the back of the neck and them being the combination to the safe. There's a really ironic aspect of this whole situation that I don't really ever see talked about, and that is the fact that when you look at the safe, you see that it has 2 dials. Typically, on a safe, when you have to turn the combination, it's 3 numbers. The fact that this safe has 2 separate dials, if it's 3 each, that would mean 6 different digits. That would mean 6 different numbers. So 6 numbers, but 8 people in the house, right? So does that mean 2 people don't have numbers tattooed to them? Well, considering that Amanda is obviously not actually a player in this game, and neither is Daniel, he's actually just the bait for Eric, then it would make sense that neither of them have numbers tattooed, and that only the 6 actual players of this game have them. So what makes this ironic is that Xavier's extended pursuit of Amanda and Daniel was completely unnecessary. He already had all of the numbers, except for his own, which he could have just cut off like he does, but without chasing after them. So yeah, we can actually figure out what the combination to the safe is. Xavier's number is the only one that we don't get a super clear look at, but in my opinion, it's definitely orange, and it looks to be a 1. And if we go by the order of the colors of the rainbow, then it goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. So yeah, if we assume that Xavier's is a 1, then the combination should be 2, 1, 16, 11, 9, 8. So here, Daniel is continuing the tradition established in the first Saw film, wherein a character pretends to be dead. The obvious example from the first film is Jigsaw himself pretending to be dead pretty much the entire movie. But in the end, Adam gets the jump on Zepp by also playing dead. And that's obviously the same move that Daniel uses here to get the jump on Xavier. Okay, so this movie had 2 big twists. One of them being the reveal that these 2 storylines that we've been following the whole movie actually aren't occurring at the same time. And that's where I have to give major props to this movie, because the filmmakers clearly knew that anyone that was coming to see this after having seen the first one would be very disappointed in this movie if it didn't have some sort of twist the way the first one did. Again, I think that twist is a big part of what makes that movie such a big deal. So not only did they try to do the same thing with this one, I actually think they did an even better job. That might be a controversial thing to say, but my reasoning is this. Not only was this reveal as equally unexpected for me at least, as the twist at the end of the first one. I also think it's much more organic within the world of the story. I talked a little bit last time about how the idea of John laying there on that dirty, cold floor, pretending to be dead, and that makeup, and wearing hardly any clothes, and it's got to be freezing, and we're talking several hours, at least 8, all just so that he could have that cool, dramatic reveal at the end, when there were other ways that he could have been watching that situation that weren't so inconvenient for him. Again, I love that twist. I don't want people thinking that I'm hating on that idea at all. I'm not. I'm just saying that Saw 2's twist actually makes more sense. There's a legitimate reason for John to deceive Eric and all the other police into thinking that what they're watching is happening live when it isn't. The twist of the film actually makes a lot of sense as far as Jigsaw's reasons for having that be part of his plan. And for the subscribers to my channel that follow me for my Lost content that might be watching this, you may or may not have heard that Damon Lindelof has actually cited that twist in Saw 2 as his motivation for something that he does in Lost. I don't want to get any more specific than that for all the Saw fans that are watching this that haven't seen Lost. But yeah, I had previously done a video talking about how Lost and Saw have some weird similarities, and this is just kind of one of them. Okay, so addressing the different versions this time is super easy, because to the best of my recollection, there are only 2 differences between the director's cut and the theatrical version. The first one is that you don't see Jigsaw eating cereal or whatever it is he's eating when the police are arriving. You don't see that in the theatrical cut. But in the director's cut, you obviously do. And the only other difference that I remember noticing is there are a few extra shots of Abby burning inside the furnace. And so yeah, Saw 2's one of the ones where it really doesn't matter that much which version you watch. There's no real significant difference. Now, this film brought on director Darren Lynn Bousman, who then went on to direct Saw 3 and 4. And that stretch of films is actually my favorite run of the series. So it seems likely that he deserves some of the credit for that. He's also come back and is the director for Spiral, the movie that's coming out on May 14th, which is another reason that I am cautiously optimistic about this movie, the fact that he's come back. Anyways, so there's some things that he does in his Saw films that I think people kind of love or hate. For example, he likes to do these in-camera transitions.
Yeah. I'll be right there. What do you got?
And he does this thing with the editing where you'll see these flashes that aren't happening literally. They're just kind of showing you a glimpse as to what's going on with the character internally. I personally like both of those things very much. But even if you're not a fan, I feel like you have to give him some credit for trying to do something unique there. Now, as far as the acting, I don't really have anything negative to say about this one. I actually think the acting is all pretty solid. Tobin Bell as Jigsaw and Donnie Wahlberg as Eric Matthews, I think their interactions and just every scene they're in general, I think they both do a really good job. I think Donnie Wahlberg really nails Eric's desperation to get his son back. And then, yeah, Tobin Bell as Jigsaw. The series of Saw and what it became really kind of lucked out that first movie, which, was just meant to be a standalone thing, cast someone like Tobin Bell. Because realistically, they could have cast almost anybody with hardly any acting talent to play that role. He lays on the ground most of the movie. And what dialogue he does have in the first Saw, you don't actually see his face while he's talking, so you could have easily had an actor ADR that. But that's not what happened. They cast Tobin Bell. He really laid on that bathroom floor for that whole time that they were shooting. It was really him in the robe in the warehouse, and it was really him that you heard speaking those lines. And yeah, it's just cool that they actually got a good actor to play that role in that first film, and it was definitely to the benefit of the ongoing series that then sprouted out of that first film. So last time I kind of talked about how the first Saw is kind of the one that I enjoy rewatching the least, even though I don't think it's the worst installment. In Saw 2, over the years, I've come to respect it more and more, and I enjoy it at least as much as I've always enjoyed watching it. I think the pacing is freaking amazing. I think the pacing of the first film is pretty good too. It's really just on rewatches that you kind of start to feel it a little bit. But yeah, I've seen Saw 2 at least as many times as I've seen Saw 1, and I'm always impressed by the pacing. And considering that you have 8 characters in the main trap storyline versus the 2 that you had in the last one, and considering that that storyline is only half of the movie, I think it's really impressive how quickly you get a sense of these characters. Now, unfortunately, with this being less than a 2-hour movie, you don't really get too emotionally attached to the characters, but I think it does as good of a job as it can do in that department with the constraints of its runtime. Now, one of the criticisms that you often hear about the Saw sequels is that they really steer heavily into the gore and torture porn elements. And while there are certain instances of some of the films that I feel that's valid, I don't really think it is here. Maybe I've just been desensitized over the years, although, again, I first saw this when I was a teenager and hadn't seen that much, violent, gory content. But yeah, I don't find this to be particularly graphic in its violence. The one instance that I remember watching this film and being like, oh my god, this is so much worse than the first one, is that opening scene where you think that Michael's gonna cut past his eye, but then you obviously realize that he isn't going to do that, and they don't show that happen, and it doesn't happen at all. And then yeah, after that, I don't think there's anything in this that I was ever like, oh my god, that's disgusting, or wow, that was way too much, or that was more than we needed to see, what have you. Now, the one criticism that I really had of this movie, specifically as a standalone film, was the sequel bait kind of way that it ended. That first one ended in a really cool way, but you kind of knew, okay, this guy has terminal cancer, and he's going to die before too long, so it's not like he's going to be out there doing this stuff much longer. And then the way that this one ends, it very much felt like the studio's obvious way of being like, well, yeah, we can't keep this guy alive much longer, but, maybe somebody else will keep doing it after him. So yeah, that was the one thing when I first saw this movie that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I guess I also didn't love the way that they ended it the same way as the first one, where Eric gets left in the bathroom and she closes the door on him. It felt a little forced to me. There wasn't really any hint that that bathroom was under a house. But without getting into spoilers for the upcoming films, I will say that Saw 3 does an excellent job of taking what you expected the rest of this series to be and subverting that expectation. And when you take the ending of this film, that being that Amanda is being set up to take over for Jigsaw once he dies, and you view it in the context of the series, it's actually a crucial component of what the overarching story is and why I think it's so interesting. And that is a good note to transition us into the last 2 sections of this video, which are specifically for people that have already seen the first 6 films. So if you have not seen that, please stop watching now, but please do come back once you have watched the first 6. So yeah, I actually think there's even less to say in these last 2 sections than there was for Saw 1. And in the case of this section, that's because, like the first film, this one was not made with plans for future installments. They obviously wanted to set up the possibility of that, as we talked about with that ending, but there's nothing really in this film that they set up and then obviously want you to wait for the sequel for them to explain. So for that reason, there's not a lot to go over as far as the connections to the other films. My next video on Saw 3 is where these last two sections are going to get a lot more substantial. And so yeah, this last section also, not a lot to say here. And that's because there's not a lot about this movie that sets up things that never got paid off. Pretty much everything that this movie sets up is paid off within the same film. And unlike the first Saw film, there isn't much of a difference between the characterization of Jigsaw and what his whole philosophy is about in the later sequels. So unlike the first one, there's not really anything that I felt the conclusion to the series needed to reconcile. But since I am kind of wanting to vaguely tease my Saw 7 rewrite in each of these videos, I will throw out something that I always thought it would be cool to see related to this film, but not necessarily something I feel that we were owed. And that is the circumstances of Amanda's arrest and Eric's framing of her. She tells Daniel that she never used heroin prior to being arrested. So the question then becomes, why was Eric interacting with Amanda to begin with? And then, yeah, why did he frame her? But okay, I think that's everything for today. I hope to see you guys in the next one.
Game over.
Hello there. If you'd like to be notified when more videos like this one arrive, just click the circle to subscribe. In the meantime, you can click either of the two boxes to check out other content from this channel. Or don't. The choice is yours.